Alright, E3 is done, let's look back very quick and see what looks cool, what looks weak, and try and find something to make fun of. Cool, cool, trash, cool, go f*** yourself, cool.
Oh my god!
Cool, trash, cool. Ah, shit. Well, I guess we gotta talk about this. During Microsoft's E3 presentation, sometime after repeating the mistakes of the past and debuting a Porsche for some reason, but sometime before actually making a good decision for once and having Terry Crews single-handedly save the entire Xbox brand, they debuted a trailer for a Blade Runner-esque 2D pixel game that frankly floored me. As a massive sucker for 80s synths, noir lighting, and capitalist dystopias, it really jumped out at me. The lack of gameplay and original music was concerning, but it was by far the most interesting thing I'd seen all day. I was on board. I took to Twitter to see what everyone was saying about it, to find the entire conversation was dominated by one fact that the trailer had failed to mention. That the last night's creative director, Tim Soret, is, in my humble opinion, kind of a monumental asshole. As someone who's done my best in the past to call attention to the importance of the individuals behind the development of a game, this leaves me in a bit of a weird place. The game itself looks downright impressive, but everything about one of the primary people behind it makes my skin crawl. But is that actually a problem? I figure now is as good as a time as any to ask that age-old question that critics and fans alike have struggled with since time immemorial. Does it matter if the thing that I like is made by someone I consider to be a terrible person? After thinking on it for a bit, the answer I ultimately come to is yes, but not quite for the reasons I initially thought of. Stay with me for a bit. When situations like this arise, a common sentiment always emerges. You should try to separate the art from the artist. Or to put it slightly more academically, people trying to utilize a lens in the vein of death of the author. For the handful of you who don't know, the term death of the author is an idea in literary criticism posited in a 1967 essay of the same name by Roland Barthes. In it, Barthes argues that when examining any text, we should view the work as entirely separate from its creator's life, beliefs, era they lived in, etc. The author is dead, long live the text. There's more to it than that and a whole history around it, but that's the basic gist. This approach to critique is unbelievably useful and can help show the broader applicability of the ideas in any narrative while uncovering themes and elements present that even the creator wasn't aware of. It's a style of critical reading that I am personally a big fan of and employ pretty frequently. However, as it's grown in recognition and popularity in recent years, it's increasingly felt as though people view it as a set-in-stone rule, rather than one potential critical lens out of many that has its own failings. And it does have failings. I could talk about how certain works are essentially autobiographical and lose all meaning when the author is extracted from them, or how abandoning historical context can make certain works totally nonsensical, or how certain authors deliberately intended you to read their works with their life and time in mind. However, given the situation at hand with The Last Night, I feel the complaint we can make is a lot simpler than all of that. Namely that in certain circumstances, applying the death of the author as a form of criticism just really isn't possible. There are times when a work is, for whatever reason, unable to escape the gravity of their author's actions and beliefs. A great example of what I mean is Ender's Game, and its infamous author, Orson Scott Card. The Ender's Game series is among my favorite novel series. I absolutely love the setting, the characters, and the theming all throughout. However, I can't really bring myself to enjoy them anymore because Orson Scott Card is aggressively homophobic. And I don't mean like, is made kind of uncomfortable by homosexuality kind of homophobic. I mean like, at one point he called for anti-gay laws to stay in place for the sake of discouraging homosexual behavior on a governmental level, and said LGBT people cannot be permitted to remain as acceptable and equal citizens within society. Source in the description. This statement recontextualizes a ton of elements of Card's writing. The fact that the invading alien race is commonly referred to as buggers ceases to be a quirky piece of world building and instead starts to take on a bit of a sinister air. And the sudden page-long diatribes about the importance of procreation in later books ceases to be pieces of authoritarian commentary and become an uncomfortable bit of legitimate propaganda. Now, you could try and employ Death of the Author here, but if you're anything like me, Card's statements are so toxic and vile that they're essentially inescapable. You can try and put him out of mind as a person, but realistically, every time from there on out that you see something that could even be considered slightly homophobic, you will be mentally dragged kicking and screaming back to the author due to the fact that you now have a mental association between Orson Scott Card and homophobia. You can still craft an interpretation that sidesteps those questionable elements, but their existence will now be highlighted to you from here on out. Even if you try to ignore them, some part of you will remember it, even if only on a subconscious level, and that will taint your interpretation to some degree. Even if the author is dead, their spirit will linger as long as you have any knowledge of them. This is doubly true for your interpretations of a work on your first reading of it, because you lack attachment to the material, and by extension are far less willing or able to excuse those elements. As such, the sheer fact that I know that Tim Sort was instrumental in the creation of The Last Night means that, were I to play it, I would inevitably have an experience marked by tension and discomfort. Not because that was the goal of the game, but due to the baggage I automatically have to bring into it. All while I'm unable to give the game a fair, dispassionate evaluation. I don't think that's an experience anyone could blame me for wanting to avoid. This isn't a call to boycott The Last Night. This isn't even really about The Last Night itself. This is about the flaws of Death of the Author and how ultimately creators are part of their own works. Their actions will always, to some degree, frame their works. And just like frames, you can choose to ignore them, or you can choose to remove the work from the frame entirely. However, if the work was initially presented in a frame made of literal shit, it'd be hard to forget about, and could make even the idea of just touching the thing kind of revolting. Death of the Author is a brilliant analytical tool that we should always be ready to utilize. But in order to make use of it, the author themselves has to be willing to let themselves be killed by not overshadowing their own work. Otherwise, they'll become exactly what Card did and what Sorit may, a ghost haunting their own creations.